table up here. This is Germany. Pick a table up here.
I bring you one in a couple of minutes.
Okay, that works. Yeah? Oh, sure. That's after the story. Oh, not after. Okay. Okay. Hello. Very pleased to meet you. So this, how do I appropriately pronounce your name? Is it Rotar with a lot of R?
If you can pronounce it, yeah.
Rotar.
Or just Rotar.
Okay. Wow. This is Rotar, who has very generously offered, to be trapped here. I have collected, by doing a bit of research, some ancient stories from Hawaii. There are many legends that go back many years to the natives of Hawaii, and I wrote many of them down for two reasons. The first is in order to keep the facts straight. If I'm going to tell you a tale, I want to make sure that I tell you the tale in the proper way. And the second is that names in the Hawaiian language can be extremely difficult to remember. They have a lot of vowels that kind of sit on each other with no consonants in between. So I had to do a bit of research, especially write down this is how the name is said. And I separated these by species because much like any culture out there, the ancient Hawaiian culture, when they were curious about the world, they looked to the animals that they shared their world with. One of them was the lizard. There are lizards very much all over Hawaii, but one in particular, which maybe we'll draw for you, they called it the mo'o. Interesting word, the mo'o. The mo'o was a monstrous lizard. It was said to be somewhere between 4 and 8 meters in length. Now, did the mo'o ever exist? Maybe it did. Did it ever act the way it did in the stories? I don't know. But it really would have been cool if it had. The description of the mo'o is between 4 and 8 meters, usually has a glistening black body. Why don't you draw the mo'o for us? I'd have to give you a black marker. 4 to 8 meters long, glistening black body. It lives in fish ponds, the ponds where you stock your fish. If there's foam on the surface of the fish pond, that's how to know that the mo'o is in residence under the pond, and you should not take the fish because they will taste bitter. That's what the Hawaiians believed, or at least that's what they told themselves over a glass of whatever fermented material they could get their hands on. Like most Hawaiian animal spirits, the mo'o is able to change its shape, and it likes to take the form of a human being. Specifically, it takes the form of a beautiful woman who is so absolutely gorgeous that no man can resist her. You still try. So the mo'o. Yes, chairs for people. Please sit. Yes, get your own damn chair. Yeah. We'll wait while she draws, and they do this, and I drink. This genuine Hawaiian gear, by the way. I had to go all the way to Hawaii.com to buy this. Yes, oh, okay. When I saw these, I said, yes, them. Give me those, give me those. Now, what would have made it perfect would be if I had black socks and sandals on. I would look exactly like an American tourist in Hawaii. The problem is there were so many presents for my friends here at Your Ferns, I didn't have room for the sandals in the back. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, the mo'o will change shape at will into a beautiful woman who will then go on to the land and seduce a man. Will take the man back home, and after giving him the night of his life, will then eat him. On one hand, this kind of sounds like a typical furry story. So we did not invent furry stories, right? They've been around for thousands of years. Now, in the stories, there's many different versions of stories with the mo'o. If the man is not eaten right at the beginning, he will stay with the mo'o, and then he will either become homesick and want to go home, or he will realize he's in danger and will try to escape. You can only escape from the clutches of the mo'o. Thank you very much. This is I can lean on it. I have this. By giving her a task that is impossible to do. Because apparently the mo'o is obsessive compulsive. You will tell this dangerous lizard creature in the form of a woman, could you fill this bucket for me? But then you put holes in the bottom of the bucket. And while she's desperately trying to fill the bucket, you walk away. Mo'o are not very bright. Well, there is one story of a fisherman. His name was Kamanu. Kamanu was fishing at a stream, went up from beneath the water. A very, very beautiful woman who, strangely, had red hair. Now, this is before Europeans ever arrived. She came up out of the water, and she was extremely pretty, shall we say, and Kamanu fell in love with her. However, he did realize, one, she's got red hair, two, she came up out of the water. This might be a mo'o. But she assured him, I'm not going to eat you. You're not like the rest of the human men I've ever seen. I would like to take you for my husband. We will get married, and we will live together at the bottom of the river forever. Okay, to me that sounds a little suspicious. Bottom of the river? I don't know. I haven't been down there before. Well, she promised him that not only would he survive, but his family that he left behind, his brothers and his sisters and his parents, would always have a large stock of fish to eat. So they would be taken good care of, and he would love them all. So they were together for a number of years, and the day came when Kamanu became homesick. He wanted to see his family again. And his mo'o wife said, all right, I will let you go. But, now, you know how in old stories magic is kind of weird and has strange rules? She said, you must not kiss anyone until you have kissed your mother. If you kiss anyone else, you will never be able to see me again. You will have to stay on land and we'll never be together. So Kamanu promised that this is what he would do. And he went home, and as soon as he got back to his hut, his old dog, who had missed him, jumped up and licked him on the face. He didn't think about that, but when he got home, he found his wife crying bitterly at the river's edge. And when he asked her what was wrong, all she said was, you have lost me. And she returned to her mo'o form, slipped under the waves, and he never saw her again. He waited for her many, many days, and eventually he simply died of sadness. A lot of these stories don't have good happy endings, by the way. I think they must be stories that are told to teach lessons. See, most of the stories we have in our European culture were stories that were told to warn of things or to teach lessons about things. I guess the warning here is, don't go out with strange women who live underwater. They might be lizards. There we have them all.
I can't make it play.
That's That's fine, I like it. You need to write Mo. It's M-O with an apostrophe O. M-O. O with an apostrophe, and then O. Yes, pronounced Mo. The Hawaiian language has a lot of these stops between the vowels. And I talked to a language professor, and I said, am I pronouncing it right? He said, almost. He said, you still don't really sound like a real Hawaiian. I said, well, what recommendation do you have? And he said, just drink a lot. Not to say that Hawaiians drink a lot, but your language will then kind of become very loose, and you'll be able to pronounce these things more easily because you won't think about it. Now, lizards were a very, very important animal in the Hawaiian culture, but an even more important animal, probably the most important, was the shark. The Hawaiians have so many stories about sharks. They're one of the most popular spirit animals. There are shark gods. There are shark kings. Each little region has its own shark spirit that isn't quite a god, but is like the #1 shark out there. And like most animal spirits, they can change their form. They've got two levels. They've got the shark level, they've got the human level, and then they've got like the fursuit level, the shark man level.
Shark with the human skin.
Basically, or a human with a shark skin on, something. They got the tail and legs. How's that? Boy, there are good ones, like Kame Ka'aui. Don't ask me to say that one again. Kame Ka'aui. He is the husband of Pele. You might have heard of Pele. Madame Pele is the fire goddess. She is the #1 goddess of Hawaii. She is the goddess of the volcano. So when the volcanoes erupt, people say, Madame Pele is pissed. And in those days, that's how the shamanic culture would work. If the volcano is rumbling, we got to do something to make Madame Pele happy. Do something good, sacrifice a fish, or throw your husband in, we don't know. And sometimes they would do some ritual or something, and then the volcano would quiet down. That worked. See? That then becomes the ritual. Sometimes they will do something, and the volcano will erupt. Don't do that again. Kame Ka'aui was a shark god. He's one of the biggest because he is Madame Pele's husband. He is actually a shark man. He's the fursuit shark. Now, he is not a bad guy. He will appear to swimmers in the water and warn them when there are evil shark spirits around and tell them you need to get out of the water now. He's kind of the ancient Hawaiian lifeguard, you see. There's another shark god, Kauhuhu is his name. Kauhuhu. He lives in a cave on the side of a very high ocean cliff that's guarded by 2 dragons. No man is allowed to see him. Apparently he's very shy, I guess. He arrives in his cave, and this is interesting. As the tide comes in, there will be 8 large waves that will rush into the cave. Now, Kauhuhu will arrive on the 8th wave. Well, he did arrive one day, and he found there was a man in the cave waiting for him. This pissed Kauhuhu off, because he didn't like people. So, this man was named Kamalo, and Kauhuhu was about to devour him, actually had his head and shoulders in his mouth with those sharp teeth around him, and Kamalo said, before you eat me, just listen to my story. So Kauhuhu took the man's head out of his mouth and said, all right, you better talk fast. Kamalo was there because he said, quite frankly, I don't have anything left to live for. I'm here in desperation because I need revenge. Now this made Kauhuhu curious. What's going on with this guy? What is so terrible? What has happened that he would come here knowing I'm going to eat him? What could this be? Kamalo had 2 sons. They were very mischievous boys. And unfortunately, they snuck into the house of a very, very powerful chief whose name, you'll be familiar with this, the chief's name was Koopa. That's where it came from. The chief Koopa was not only powerful, he was very, very mean. These boys went in and were playing the tiki drums that belonged to Koopa. The tiki drums are not just happy musical rave instruments. You know, they are a very, very sacred thing. And these boys were playing with them like they were toys. This made Koopa extremely angry, so he killed both of the boys on the spot and threw their bodies into the ocean. Kamalo, whose wife was gone, all he had was his 2 boys. Now everything was gone. So he was really, really pissed off at Koopa. So he went to ask Kalhuhu, you know, you're going to eat me, but could you eat him too? Now Kalhuhu kind of admired this guy's chutzpah. So he told Kamalo, go back to your village. Here's what you need to do. Make yourself a sanctuary on top of a cliff. Take all of your animals. Also, he gave him a list of sacred animals. Put them in this enclosure and surround it with white stakes, which themselves are very sacred, in a ring, and just stay in there. And, you know, Kamalo said, what now? How long do I stay? And Kalhuhu said, wait for the next storm to come. Go into that ring. So the next time a storm came, Kamalo took all the animals and all the animals he was instructed, and he put up the stakes, and they sat inside this ring. And the storm came up, and as the storm was raging, a rainbow came over the sky, and Kalhuhu, you know, something like this, but like 400 feet tall, you know, basically came surfing over the land in this giant wave that washed the evil Koopa and all of his minions off into the water, where they were all consumed by other sharks. It's sort of interesting.
All you can eat.
Exactly. Yes, you play that game. I find it kind of interesting because every culture, even one that to that date had never been exposed to European culture, every culture has a story of a huge flood that comes and destroys everything except for one guy who was in a special place at a special time. Kind of makes you think about it, doesn't it? That they, by the way, is now called Aikanaka. It's still called that, which means man-eater. So, be fun to visit there someday and leave this guy alone. I like it. I'll show you the name. Call without the dash. I put that just now. K-A-U.
Okay.
Yeah, K-A-U. H-U-H-U. Call who? Yeah. Now, as I said, beside the shark gods, there were shark kings. We're still on sharks. You can draw another shark. Yeah. Sharks are fun and have sex.
I like Hawaii.
Now, this story does not have a good ending. Like I said, not all of them do. There was a shark god whose name was Kamoho Ali'i. That's going to be a hard one. No, it's not going to be a hard one to say. Kamoho Ali'i was the king of all the sharks in one region. He was swimming around just being a shark, right?
Just shark.
When a woman jumped in the water. Her name was Kage. She jumped in the water with no clothes on. And the shark fell in love with her naked form. This is a furry story. Remember what I'm talking about? He was just totally smitten by her. So he snuck around behind a reef and assumed the form of a handsome man. Remember, animals are always changing in the Hawaiian legends. And he came out and they fell in love and they got married. Now, here's the problem. You can't stay in that form forever if you're a shark. Eventually you have to return to the water. Now, rationally, I would think he could go take a dip every day or so, but it didn't work out that way. he eventually told her, he said, look, I gotta go. And she said, but I'm pregnant. Uh-oh. He said, oh, crap, I really can't stay. All right. Sorry, gotta go. But let me leave you some advice. When the baby's born, never, ever, ever let him eat meat. Do not let him eat meat at all. And then he left. And Kage was left miserable, pregnant. And eventually she went off by herself and gave birth to the son of the Shark King. And unfortunately, the baby was born with what looked like a defect. On his back was a large slit that looked like a fish's mouth in the middle of his back. And Kage was very upset by this, but the baby otherwise seemed healthy. So she wrapped like a little shawl around him to hide this from everyone else, and she named him Nanaue. So young Nanaue grew up with his mother, typical young boy. She never allowed him to eat meat. Unfortunately, in the Hawaiian culture, women and men are not allowed to eat together. This was a tradition that goes back many thousands of years. Uh-oh. Anyway, eventually the time came when Nanaue grew to adolescence. And his grandfather took him away because, you're not a kid anymore, you will eat with the men. They sat him down, and what did they do? They put this big plate of pork in front of him. And as soon as he ate the pork, he started to convulse. And that slit in his back grew large triangular teeth. And he soon discovered that he had not only the ability to transform himself into a shark, a very large shark, but even when he was a man, he still had that shark mouth on his back. But number two, he now had a desire for flesh that could not be ignored. It was insatiable. So, unfortunately, let's just say people in the village who went swimming started to disappear. One by one, they disappeared. And, well, for one reason or another, people started to suspect that Nanaue might be responsible, considering that he was always there when a swimmer disappeared. And every time the swimmer had disappeared, he would come up out of the water going, nom, 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 nom. Actually, that's not part of the story. I made that part up. I'm just trying to envision, because the story simply says that people began to suspect Nanaue. They tore off his shirt and saw this gaping shark mouth gnashing at them. So Nanaue leaped into the water. He transformed himself into a shark, and he swam to the island of Maui, where he came up on land, tried very, very hard to just, let's lead a normal life, right? We're just going to start anew, and we're going to try to nom, nom, nom. That was the problem. He married the daughter of a chief. And as much as he tried, he could not keep that desire for flesh down. And one day, he was, oh wow. He was so desperate, he, in front of everybody, grabbed a young girl off the beach, jumped into the water, transformed into a shark, and just tore her apart in front of everybody. This did not sit well with the villagers. So, from Maui, where did he go from there? He wound up in Molokai. Unfortunately, in those days, they didn't have the internet, but they had drums. They could communicate by drums and by runner. News had traveled to Molokai. Dude, watch out for guy with shark mouth on his back. Eats people, LOL, okay, thanks, bye. So when he arrived at Molokai, he was trying to just be his normal self, but the chief had men watch him. And as soon as they saw Nanaue jump into the water and transform into a shark, fishermen swarmed out with nets, and they threw the nets over him, and the warriors came out with clubs. They dragged him onto the beach, and they beat him to death with their clubs. End of story. Yeah, I know, it's a really sucky ending. And I wish, I could make up a really great ending, but I'm just telling history here. So, I'm glad we drew this part here. So that particular shark, that's Kamai Ka Ui. It doesn't have the dash, I put that by accident. It's Kamai Ka Ui. Yeah, you can keep that a second. This just for spelling. What else we got? Dogs. There were dogs in ancient Hawaii. They came in on the first vessels, paddled canoes. Incidentally, it was believed that it was sharks that guided the Polynesians from the islands out west to the islands of Hawaii to help them populate the islands. They brought dogs with them. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Now, we're not going to draw Nanaue because that would be really sick. So, there were people called the Olohe. The Olohe were basically dog people. The only difference was they looked like dogs, but they had no hair, and they walked upright, and every single version of the tale uses the same wording, which is very bizarre. They say that the Olohe specialized in wrestling and breaking bones. Two very useful talents to have if you look like a dog with no hair, I guess. The leader of these people was named Kope, and he had the power to turn himself into an actual gigantic dog. So, you had to watch out for Kope because he would use these powers to stalk men and kill them. It was just his thing. He was kind of like a Hawaiian Hannibal Lecter. Why did he do it? Because I can. And let's face it, if you had the power to turn into a giant dog, you'd be an asshole too. So Kope would turn himself into this giant dog, and he just kept on doing this all his life until he died of natural causes. And then he became a giant ghost dog who still hunts men in the, forests and the trails of Hawaii. So here is probably a cautionary tale for children. Do not go off into the forests because you never know if Kope, the giant ghost dog, will come and bite your head off. There was another dog fellow. 1, 2, 3. Ku'ili Olaha. That's a good one. Yeah, I should. Sorry. Ku'ili Oloa. That worked. Ku'ili Oloa was a demigod who could assume the form of either a man or a dog. He was a protector of travelers. If a traveler was in trouble, he would just appear out of nowhere, and they would run off and bring help, or would bring water, or would bring food. This spiritual dog, nobody knew where it came from. That's who they thought it was. He could be a dog. He could also take a human form, but he wasn't good at it, because every time he took his human form, he still had a dog's tail. He fitted perfectly here. As a matter of fact, if anybody here is of Hawaiian descent, you might be him. That tail wheel, it wags. Go protect a traveler. This one's also going to be tough. This one is actually a very, very popular story that's told to children even today. There was an old man with a magical dog whose name was Puapua Lena Lena. Gotta love Hawaii. Puapua Lena Lena was a dog who was very, very faithful to his owner, but also had the ability to change his size and his shape, because Puapua Lena Lena was actually a demigod. Most demigods are off you know, throwing lightning bolts at people or making lava somewhere. Poor Lena was just perfectly happy being a dog. Now, that's kind of a cool demigod, if you ask me. So, the problem is, the old man loved to drink. And what he drank was called awa. It is a fermented beverage. Similar to wine, but I understand. Oh, I've got a friend. Similar to wine, but more potent. I can do some now. The old man would drink awa, which is actually the fermented root of the awa plant. Now, since this is a nice root that makes a really, really good wine, common people were not supposed to have it. So, poor Lena would sneak in to the garden of the chief and would dig up the awa root and would carry it home to his master so he could make wine out of it and get drunk. That's my kind of story. And my kind of dog.
You should get one.
Yes, I need a demigod dog who will go and steal grapes for me and I can make wine out of them. And then, if he got caught, well, here's what happened. Someone saw poor Lena digging up the root and chased him back to his master's house. And they realized that the old man was the one who had been responsible for taking the awa root. So, poor Lena followed his master, because everyone thought he was just a regular dog, to the point he was going to be put to death. And poor Lena did not want that to happen, so since he was a demigod, he kind of disappeared and snuck into the world of the gods, which is another world that exists far away from mortal eyes. Poor Lena went in there desperately looking for something that could save his master. And what he found was a very large shell, known as a conch shell. It's a large spiral shell, which, if you put a hole in one end and blow into it, you can actually produce a very loud musical note. The conch shell. It's pronounced conch. A lot of people say conch, because in English it has a CH on it. But, you know, the English-speaking people are much like the French. We sometimes just ignore letters. That's an extra letter. They cost money. Just don't use it. So, poor Lena took the conch, came back into this world, and just as his master was about to be put to death, he said, "Whoa, hold it! Everybody, take 5, hang on!" And the chief basically said, "Holy fuck, a talking dog! WTF!" Quickly got onto his cell phone. "Dude, talking dog here." And all over Hawaii, RT, talking dog, Maui. No, I made that up too. They didn't have it. I just got it on drums. Talking dog here. LOL. Okay, thanks, bye. So he took the shell and he gave it to the chief. Basically bribed the chief with this conch shell. Said, "Here, I will give this to you if you let my master go." And the chief said, "Dude, a talking dog? Why the hell not? This sounds good to me. Okay, old man, get out. Don't take my awa root anymore. But just piss off, take your dog with you. I'll keep this neat shell." Now that shell was treasured by the king. His actual name was Kiha. And that shell was passed down through the generations from king to king to king to king to the great Kamehameha, to the descendants of Kamehameha, and that shell actually exists, and you can find it today in the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, the actual conch shell that was brought by poor Lena from the realm of the gods. I'd like to see that. I'd also like to try awa sometime. That sounds real good. Yes, they're bone breakers.
Better than anything.
He's easy. He's Kage. K-A-U-P. I'm not going to make you do poor man.
I can draw some people talking.
Okay. So what other animals do we have? Owls. Owls are cool, and they're very, very important in the Hawaiian mythos. Let's see. The thing is, most of the time, owls generally don't transform. They stay as owls, probably because they're cool enough as owls. You don't need to transform into a person. Owls, as we said, are cool. So, in the Hawaiian language, the owl is known as pueo. Pueo, P-U-E-O. Pueo. They are not only animals, but they are spirits. They are, in the Hawaiian belief, pueo are able to bring the dead back to life. As if owls were not cool enough, they can actually bring dead people back to life. They are thought to be manifestations of what's called the Amakua. The Amakua were the ancestor spirits. So when people saw an owl, or pueo, they believed that what they were seeing was the spirit of a long dead ancestor watching over them. Now, I used to work with owls. There is something about their face, something very human about the look of an owl. And when they fly, little side note, biological note about owls, their feathers are designed so that when they fly, they make no sound. There's no rush of winds, no flap. When an owl flies, it's silent. So you can easily imagine that this is not an actual bird, but a spirit, because when it flies at you and flies overhead, no noise comes out. Obviously, it has to be a spirit. So the pueo, they were ancestor spirits. Well, there was a man who lived in Oahu who didn't really have a lot of money or a lot of food, and he got extremely desperate. The only thing he could find to eat was the nest of an owl. And there were eggs in the nest. So the man, in desperation, took the eggs out of the nest with the intention of cooking them and eating them. And just as he was taking them out, he looked up, and there was the owl. Basically like this. So the man was extremely apologetic. He told the owl that he was sorry. He put the eggs back. And not only did he do that, but even as hungry as he was, when he went back home, he took what energy he had and he built a little shrine to kind of, honor the owl and to try to make up for this crime that he had almost committed. Well, the owl was impressed by that. Okay, yeah, the guy, it is kind of like Les Miserables, Jean Valjean tried to steal my eggs, but he was hungry, the eggs are safe, he's okay, he's not really a dick. Okay, we'll give him a pass on that one. Now, he built this shrine, and basically, owls are cool, we're going to have spirits here, and he had this little shrine here, and he would put offerings on it. This upset the local chief, because each little area of Oahu had its own ruling gods, if you will, the official gods that you're supposed to be worshiping. And the chief didn't like this extra shrine being built, so apparently the penalty for everything in ancient Hawaii was to be put to death. How there were any Hawaiians left, I don't know. He built a shrine to the wrong god, they put him to death. He married the wrong woman, they put him to death. He turned into a shark, they put him to death. He double parked, they put him to death. When Captain Cook arrived in Hawaii, there was only 2 Hawaiians left. And they ate him. That's in the history books, you can read about that. I'm getting off the subject. Just as the executioner had raised the club, they didn't cut her head off, they basically smashed her skull open, to not knock this guy out into the next world, the sky became dark. And when the people looked up, there were hundreds of thousands of owls just silently flying, so many of them that they blocked out the light. The king got the message. If you know what I mean. There was a princess in Manoa, which is a municipality of Hawaii, the most beautiful girl in all of Hawaii. Her name was Kahala Opuna. And Kahala Opuna was given as bride to a chief named Kage. Now, everyone accepted she was the most gorgeous, beautiful woman on the face of the planet. Now, yes. Now remember, these are furry stories. And furries always come with drama. So people started plotting and whispering very nasty things about Kahala Opuna to her husband, basically saying she was sleeping around, saying she was cheating on him, she was stealing money, she was turning into a shark. You know, horrible, horrible things. Now, Kage was a bit immature, and instead of going to her and saying, "Excuse me, have you been turning into a shark?" No, he just killed her. There you go. It's a Hawaiian thing. It's like, oh, no, parking ticket, death. There you go. Well, he killed her, and then in his rage, he killed her, and then he was, oh my God, I murdered my wife. So he buried her body in a very, very shallow grave, hoping no one would find out. But that night, an owl landed with its claws. It unearthed the body, it dug the body out of the shallow grave, and then lowered its head down, and it rubbed its beak against her face. And it restored her to life. She climbed up out of the grave, and she went to try to find Kage to say, "Dude, what the fuck?" She really wanted to make up with him, but as soon as he saw her, he was like, "Ah, stab!" So he killed her again. I didn't write the story. This story has been told for generations. So the owl dug her up again and touched its beak to her. And she went back. It's like, "Dude, quit killing me, stab!" He killed her a third time. He killed her a total of 4 times, just to make this long story a little shorter. On the 5th time she showed up at his doorstep, and he stabbed her again, and he said, "Okay, maybe I'm not burying her deep enough." He made sure she was dead. Okay. He went to find a very, very large koa tree, and he buried her as deep as he could under the roots of the tree. Now the owl tried very, very hard to scratch away the dirt, but simply was just a small owl. Even as cool as he was, he couldn't scratch away the dirt. So, the owl instead went to find a very, very powerful chief whose name was Mahana, and led the girl's ghost to Mahana to basically say, "Hey, look, my husband murdered me, I'm buried under this tree." Now, different cultures fascinate me. If that had been me, I'd have been like, "Ah!" But Mahana, I guess maybe because the owl was there, said, "That's a sexy ghost. I'm going to dig her up and marry her." Which is what he did. So he dug her up and he said, "Great, you're alive again with the help of the owl, and you're alive, and we are going to get married." And she said, "But I'm already married. I'm still married to Kage, the guy who keeps killing me. But I'm still married, you know, we still got the ring. We've not been legally divorced." So she felt that she kind of had to go back and at least get his blessing. But this time she took Mahana with her. So when Kage came out to do the stabbing thing, Mahana got in the way, they had a big fight, and Mahana basically beat the living shit out of Kage and sent him off into exile. So, now, the two fell in love, they got married, and they were happy for 2 years, and I'm not making this up, until Kage returned in the form of a shark and ate her. I'm liking this. This is fun. Although, here's the problem. The next animals that are rather important are pigs, but they're not at all sexy. It's pretty ignorant.
I try my best.
Okay, why the hell not? Pigs. There was a man. His name was Kamapua'a. And Kamapua'a was the son of a woman who was married to a rather decrepit and elderly chief. Kind of looked like this. Imagine being married to this. Would you want to have sex with this? Can't blame a guy for trying. Well, his wife kind of decided she liked gods better. And who wouldn't? So she had a fling with a local god. And, well, then she got pregnant. And the chief was like, oh, boy, I'm going to be a father. Wait. I don't remember screwing you. So the chief kind of knew that there was a bit of a problem. This child was born. Kamapua'a was a very, very handsome child, but the chief rejected him. You know, this is a bastard. This is not my son. He was kind of obliged to raise the boy, but he was not obliged to love him. As a matter of fact, he hated him. This left Kamapua'a with issues. That's going to happen when basically your father rejects you and hates you. So Kamapua'a kind of went out on his own, and like most teens with issues, he decided to get into the rebellious stage. He became a marauder. He had his whole body tattooed in black, and he grew bristles on his chin and on top of his head. And the more crimes he committed, the uglier he became, until he started to look very much like a pig. He was sort of a pig man who would take his band of marauders and storm into villages and well, I guess you can't kill people because that's the legal thing to do. He would go in and throw eggs at them. I don't know. He would do something. All they say is he was a marauder. And then one day, a very, very sacred canoe arrived on Hawaii. On it was a magnificent, beautiful woman whose name, and this should be familiar to you, was Pele. Pele had arrived in Hawaii. She arrived in the form of an absolutely magnificent, gorgeous woman. Kamapua'a saw her and said, "Whoa, that's for me. Oh yeah." Now, the thing is, Pele was known to have a very fiery temper. Anyway, she basically said, "Dude, you're a fucking pig. No." But unfortunately, Kamapua'a was not the kind of man to take no for an answer. Pele was not about to say yes, so the two basically got into this love-hate lovers spat. And eventually, Pele said, "All right." Which, as near as I can figure in the modern, traditional way of looking at it, I think she said, "Okay, we'll go out on one date, and that's it." But as soon as they laid down together, because you could do that on the first date, no way. As soon as they laid down together, Kamapua'a changed. Once he was in the arms of this beautiful woman, he transformed back into a very, very handsome young man, from the form of that pig into a really good-looking young guy. Now, in the European tradition, that would sort of be the end of the story. This is a different culture. When he transformed, Pele said, "Whoa! Dude, you just fucking changed in front of me! I want nothing to do with you! You're a freak! You're creepy! Goddamn furry, get out of here!" this kind of really upset Kamapua'a. And she said to him, and I wrote this down because this is actually inscribed in a very, very old text that was transcribed early in the 18th century, I believe, the 19th century, sorry, the 1800s. She said, "You need to leave me alone. I came here to be a queen. But apparently you're just as powerful as I am. Can't have that. So, you need to stay away. You can have the very lush green valleys of Hilo, Hamakua, and Kohala. Keep them wet and fertile. I will stay here in Kau and Kona, and I will balance your rain with the fire of the sun." And with that, she retreated into a cavern beneath Kilauea. And that cavern sealed up and was obscured by a flow of lava. And that molten stone set the bushes and the trees on fire. And of course, Kamapua'a, not wanting to be set on fire himself, jumped into the water. And as soon as he jumped into the water, he transformed again into a fish for some reason. And again, when you're telling ancient legends, the ancient guys didn't ever have to explain themselves. They would just make up all sorts of shit, and people would say, "Oh, it must be wisdom." I know what it was. Kamapua'a transformed into a fish, and that fish is called the Humuhumunukunuku. The Humuhumunukunuku is the official state fish of the state of Hawaii. Yes, Hawaii is an American state. A lot of Europeans don't know that. A lot of Americans don't know that either. It is part of my country. Now, he knew that Kohala and those lands, always moist with rain, they were his, even if he would never set foot on land again. So he still rules without ever being able to return to land. He protects the pigs of Kohala. He protects the abundance of Hawaii by roaming the falls. But more than anything, he protects the pain of the broken heart. Oh yeah, I'm like, that's all I have on pigs, but I want to see more of this guy. I'm just thinking 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock, we're gonna rock. Or are we done? I don't know.
Is the story done?
The story is done. Kamapua'a. Yeah. I didn't write these names. Remember, these were written by ancient Hawaiians.
Never to explain this thing.
Yeah. Kamapua'a. Yep. And the last animal that was very, very important, I shouldn't say the last animal, the last of which I could find some really cool stories, were turtles. Turtles are known as honu in Hawaii. The Hawaiian name is Honu, which is real easy to spell. It's just 4 letters.
I like this one.
But the name of this one turtle was Honopo'okea. Honopo'okea. That's her name. Don't wear it out. Turtles had joined the sharks in guiding the Polynesians to the Hawaiian Islands. The green sea turtle is still considered the symbol of a navigator that's able to find its way home regardless of storm or whatever, because the sea turtle can always navigate back to its home. So what better spirit animal for a navigator out at sea? It is the spirit guide of sailors. And long ago, on the moonlit shores of Honolulu, there appeared a magnificent turtle whose name was Honopo'okea. Okay. Honopo'okea was looking to build a nest, and she was looking for the perfect place to build her nest. And she found it on the black sands of the shores of Honolulu. There was a guy with a magic dog drinking. Crossing the stories a little bit here. She pulled herself ashore. She dug a very, very shallow hole, and she laid a single egg in that hole. And she pushed the black sand on top of it to keep it warm to keep it safe. Her mate was waiting offshore, and we're not going to go into that part of the story. That's turtle sex, okay? But, so basically they went off and turtled. So that we're not going to draw that either. Okay. That egg hatched. Now, since this was a mystical turtle, a magical turtle, the small turtle that came out was a little turtle named Kage. Kage made her home in the bottom of a freshwater spring that her parents had made for her before they went off to have turtle sex. Children would come to play in that spring. And Kawila kind of got used to this. She liked having children play in the spring, so she would occasionally transform herself into the form of a little girl and would play with the children. And of course, she would protect them. If they were to stray out to sea too far, she would go out and get them. She was the protector of children. Where have we heard this before? Magic turtle, protector of children. Go watch your Japanese movies, okay? That's where they got the idea from.
They have those in New York too.
What? Yes, yes. Now the thing is, that spring is still there. And children still go play at that spring. And it's always considered that this spring, which is the only source of fresh water on that island, Honolulu, that was the gift of this mystic turtle for the children, for the people of the island, fresh water that they could drink, and a beach where they could play safely. All the other stories about turtles are about sex. We're not going to discuss that. So the stories, I thought I could kill more than an hour, and that was just about an hour. I'm good at doing an hour, but I'm going to let you finish this. Now, okay, the thing is, we got multiple turtle names. We've got Koea, the little magical little girl turtle. We've got Honoea, that's the mate, you know, the guy turtle out there with yeah. There's Honopo Okea, that's mommy turtle. Or just Hono, the turtles themselves. So we'll see if we come up. And those of you who didn't understand the reference, in Japan in the 60s and 70s, they created the monster Gamera, which was a giant turtle whose only weakness was he liked kids. And never wanted to hurt kids. Talk about a pussy monster. Oh, I'm destroying Japan! Oh, look at that little girl. I'll just go back in the ocean now. It's like, dude, really? But it was fascinating doing the research into these animals because I could see the basis of a lot of pop culture stuff. You know, the evil King Koopa. Yeah, we all know where he is now, right? If you go to Hawaii, a lot of these legends are still alive. The places are named after these beings. Some people, maybe outside of their rational minds, still believe that spirit animals are out there watching them. They maybe still believe that the owls could bring relatives back from the dead. Although, having seen what happens to people coming back from the dead in recent TV shows, I don't know if you want to have that. Is such that they would not want to consume your flesh. So there's a moral in this. If you should ever happen to kill your wife, and you bury her in a shallow grave, and she returns the next day and says, dude, what the fuck? Take a lesson from the movies, make sure you get her in the head. That was the problem he gets done. I like it. Well, okay, we'll go easy on you. Simply, Hono. We'll do this. Hono without the dash. Hono. Yeah, he's the big male turtle, and he looks good. Hono. Hono. This, and then apostrophe. Yeah. That's it. What should we do with it? You need to sign this. What should we do with these beautiful pictures? I think we should put these in the charity office. Yeah. Before I take my leave, are there any questions about Hawaii, about the American presence there, or the pronunciation of these names, which I had to practice for a long time? Any questions for our magnificent artist, Rotan? No? In that case, thank you all very much for coming, and we will see you soon.